There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Well, hello, BookTube. I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. I'd like to draw your attention to my COVID blouse. This is how I cheered myself up when I had COVID. I bought this blouse online, and it came in time for today's Friday Reads. Isn't it lovely? It's cheering me up immensely. Thanks for all your expressions of concern about my health. As you could see, I was quite uncomfortable going into so much detail. I'm not going to continue to go into so much detail, other than to say that several of you, including one doctor, said, "Have you been tested for sleep apnea?" And in fact, yes, I was. I was diagnosed with sleep apnea last December, and I took the machine home and didn't like it, and it made me cough terribly, and I only used it for about 3 weeks, and it sat in the corner collecting dust for the better part of a year. So all of those suggestions made me think, Sean, you didn't give it an honest try. Dust it off, take it down and get it cleaned up and get the parts replaced and try it again. So I've now been on it for 2 nights and I'm certainly sleeping better. Maybe today I have a little bit more energy than usual, but I'm not expecting immediate results in the fatigue department. It's certainly seems to be helping giving me a good night's sleep with very little coughing. So things are looking up. I'm feeling optimistic. Enough about that. I'm not going to give you blow-by-blow, play-by-plays about my health unless, like I say, it starts to impact what I'm doing here and what I'm not able to do. So this week I was just about as tired as the week before, but not quite, and so I have done a little bit of reading, not too much. There you go. I had another Biblioadventure with my mum last night. The reading was a joint reading, book launch type of deal, with Trevor Herriot, who is a naturalist writer in Saskatchewan. He writes a lot of environmental stuff and reconciliation stuff. The only book of his I've read so far is this one that I did talk about on my channel back in the day, Towards a Prairie, Atonement. This is about reconciliation. It was excellent. His probably most well-known book, arguably, that my mum has read and loved. I've had an unread copy on my shelf, bought it in Tokyo, shipped it here, so I've paid for it twice. I better read the darn thing one of these days. River in a Dry Land, A Prairie Passage by Trevor Herriot, and it is all about the settlement of the northern Great Plains, but in particular the ecological and cultural tragedy of the destruction of the natural nature around here, grasslands, I believe. His new novel, I believe, is called The Economy of Sparrows. I think that's it. Here's the cover. I didn't buy a copy. My mum did. She doesn't keep books, so I'm going to get it eventually. And I've now heard him read from it twice. He's never written a novel before, and this one sounds pretty darn good, and it's about all of those same themes. He read together with Candace Savage, who is a Saskatchewan historian. I would say maybe popular historian. She's not university prof or anything, but she's written scads of books on prairie history. I've never read any of them. I've never heard anything really good or bad about them. They're just books that are kind of on my radar that I never investigated any further. And she launched the paperback edition of her book that came out last year, maybe in hardcover, called Strangers in the House. And that is a history of the French-Canadian family that lived in the house that she and her husband live in today. Editing Sean here, just to make this a little bit more clear, that house is in Saskatoon. That house was built in about 1920, and the first occupants, perhaps, or one of the early occupants, was a French-Canadian family that experienced a lot of discrimination as French speakers in the new province of Saskatchewan. And so her book is about all that. She read from it. It sounds good. My mom got a copy. I'll get it eventually. And it was a really stimulating evening. So I will probably read Trevor Herriot's novel next, but eventually I want to get to this River in a Dry Land as well. And if all goes well, I'll have him on my channel, and maybe Candace Savage too. So that was a fabulous little Biblioadventure last night. And this is your final reminder for a Biblioadventure online. Dorian Stuber and I are hosting a book launch online on Eventbrite. All the links and everything will be in the show notes for our friend James Morrison's debut novel, and my paper copy just came in the mail yesterday, Gibbons, or One Bloody Thing After Another. This is actually quite a beautiful little paperback. There's the end do they call it end papers if it doesn't go onto this side? But anyway, that's beautiful. Lots of illustrations, and all the design has been done by James too, including the cover, which is as it should be, since he's such a cover critic, the caustic cover critic. This book is being launched online Saturday night, tomorrow, 6 p.m. my time. So you click on the Eventbrite, you'll find out what time it is in your time zone. Please do come out to it. It's totally free, and find out all about this book. Now that I've finally got the actual physical book in my hand, it's like, oh, it really feels good in your hand. It's beautifully nice paper. I like the font, and there's a couple different fonts being used. And I think there might even be a haircut involved. So you're going to have to tune in just for the possible haircut. Spoiler alert, it's not mine. 2 bits of Patreon news. We had another of our monthly bookish brunches last Saturday, and oh my god, each one seems to be better than the last. They're just getting better and more well-attended and more fun. So we just meet up on Zoom and talk about what we're reading. I don't, because everybody knows what I'm reading, but the other people talk about what they're reading, and I make notes on all the books and get that list to everybody on the Patreon website. But it's just a rollicking good time for bookworms. So anyone who's a member of my Patreon is invited to attend every month, any time that it fits into your schedule. And that was a real blast. And then also I'd like to welcome one new patron, Julius, who heralds from Washington State. A new book buddy patron. Welcome, Julius. I don't know anything about this person. I'm very glad to have him on board. Another thing I should say to any patrons watching at the mid or upper tier levels for the read-along of Grey Bees by Andrey Kurkov. I am ramping up, but I'm not making fast progress. It'll probably be another few weeks before I'm ready to post my review of this on Patreon. I'm so sorry about the delay. I think you understand why, but I'm certainly looking forward to finishing it, getting my review up there, and the ensuing discussion. Similarly, I haven't mailed out any bookmarks to new patrons or the freebie books, but this weekend is going to be a weekend of postal reckoning. And because I don't have a whole lot to say today, I decided to invite another special guest. Let's go see who it is, shall we? My special guest for this week's Friday Reads is the preeminent Irish novelist and reader extraordinaire, Ronan Hession, back again on my channel. Hello, Ronan.
Hi, Sean. Thanks for having me on again. And I always enjoy watching your videos. It's my sort of Friday treat. I work from home on Friday, so my tea break is usually a bit of Sean time. So I'm delighted to be back on.
It'll be a bit of Sean and Ronan time this week. Yeah. You have some breaking news. What have you got to tell the world? It's been all over Twitter since yesterday.
Yeah, I have a new novel coming out next year called Ghost Mountain, coming out in May, and we did the cover reveal yesterday, and I got a really nice reaction. I love cover art; is really important to me. I think my background's in music, so album cover art is really an important part. Like in books, it's kind of a little more loosey-goosey, like you would never imagine Sgt. Pepper's having multiple covers, but in books, every new edition has a new cover, whereas I kind of feel they're sacrosanct, and that's why I don't really have blurbs on my book covers or anything like that. I like to keep the artwork intact. But yeah, I've been looking for over a year, I'd say, for just a suitable image, and came up with a beautiful painting by quite a well-known Irish painter called Tom Clement. And he had a beautiful series of paintings of mountains. So I got in touch with him, explained, the project, and he was great. And very enthusiastic. And I think he's enjoying seeing his work come and being viewed by a whole new audience of people. So it's really great, and I kind of feel it's off to a nice start, because the proofs of the book will be out next month. So I'll get a copy to you, Sean, for your own reading amusement. So it's nice that sort of its public life is starting to pop up a bit. It's great.
Wonderful. And I want to reserve my spot to have a chat with you about the new novel when it comes out. So that'll be great. Give us a little bit. The last time you were here, you told us a little bit about it, but give us your elevator pitch for Ghost Mountain again.
Well, I was at a literary festival in Bratislava recently, and I was interviewed, and so I explained what it's about. It's a hard book to explain, but the basic premise is that there's a mountain that appears from nowhere, appears suddenly, and it affects the lives of the local community, including the town drunk, a retired art teacher, a couple where the man is a young soul and the woman is an older soul, and the clerk of maps. But really, there are sort of two main sort of themes in the book. One is the sort of fragile sense of self or unseen self that we carry with us and that we don't really understand, and the way in which we project that into the world to validate it. And we project it into a world that is kind of indifferent to this mysterious self we carry around. And the other main theme is the sort of shadow presence of absence in life. An exploration of that through the lives of these interesting characters. And it spans across a couple of generations. There are lots of different people involved. It's written in a very sort of simple style. There's a lot of white space on the page, short sentences, short chapters. And it's written, I'm telling you more than is out there, so this is a scoop. But it's written as, Ghost Mountain itself is 3 books. It's book 1, 2, and 3. So what's being published are those, it's three books, the 3-book installments of Ghost Mountain. So it's quite a departure from me, I think, stylistically and everything. And I just sort of feel that my first 2 books were an apprenticeship in ways, and that I feel like I'm starting to get going now. But my publisher said it's his favorite of my 3 books, and my wife, so the 2 people who matter most in terms of the future of the book, are positive about it. So I'm at the stage now where I'm just excited that it's going to be read in the next few weeks for the first time.
How fabulous. Presences, absences, and Ghost Mountain. I think sounds like it's all going to tie together.
I hope so. It's a stretch for me, I think, the book, but I'm really happy with how it came out. And it had very few typos in it. So if you want a blurb or a headline for your show, when my editor came back, there was only like 1 or 2 typos in the whole thing. So if nothing else, I hope reviewers remember that. One of the fewest typos in history.
Yes, I've come across a lot of typos in my reading life, and it's not very impressive. And I think you might have been reading a book or 2 of late that you might like to tell us about too, Ronan.
Yeah, there are a few things I've been, I normally, as you know, like yourself, I read a lot of translated fiction, but actually some of the stuff I've been reading lately is not translated, so I thought I might just talk about some of that. One book I really enjoyed, and I don't know if you've read anything by Charles Boyle. Charles Boyle is a really
No, but you talked
interesting...
about a different book by him last time you were here. Not that one, a different one.
So Charles is a writer in his own right. Charles is in his 70s. He's been writing for a long time, but he runs one of the best publishers around called CB Editions. And this is called Farthings. And it's a collection of, I don't know how many essays. Is it 44 very short essays about his experience of running a very small publisher? And they're just like little paragraphs, each one with just little insights. And he has here's one randomly, number 47. Number of titles, not including those published this year, published by CB Editions, that have sold fewer than 100 copies through the distributor, Central Books, 15. So 15 of their titles sold fewer than 100 books. Number of titles that have sold more than 1,000 copies through the same route, 4. So he just kind of gives that sort of interesting basic insights and stories about what it means to run, and most of it is about queuing up in post offices. One of the people that's published on CB Editions is my favorite poet around, and I think I might have read something by Philip Hancock before. He has one collection called City Works Department, and he's a new collection now called House on the A34. And Philip is a beautiful poet. He's a painter and decorator. So a lot of his poetry is about being a painter and decorator and his life, and just what he sees of people's lives, what he sees of himself and about his childhood. He's from Stoke in England, though he lives in London. And he's married to Astrid Alban, she's from the Netherlands. She's also quite an established poet, a very talented poet. So really, a really good collection, if you like, really down to earth, good observation. So it's a really beautiful collection. And then I have a couple of books, which I think, these 2 books I think are the 2 best books I've read this year. These 2. Grimish by Michael Winkler and Kick the Latch by Catherine Scanlon. I think have you read Kick the Latch? I think have you?
I have, and I enjoyed it. I didn't love it the way you did, but I very much
Yeah.
enjoyed it. Yes.
So they're both, I suppose, in the category. I think they're two quite glaring Booker omissions, actually, and I suspect it's because they sort of tread that line between narrative fiction and narrative non-fiction. So I'd say judges are like, "What the hell is this?" But I thought they were both brilliantly done. Catherine Scanlon, Kick the Latch, as you know, is really an interview with a woman who has been a jockey on the sort of lower level circuits and all just the reality of all that. But I love the way it's presented. I love the simplicity of it. I love the candor of it, and I think it's a really, I kind of think these are like kind of documentary novels. You know, they're like documentaries where she's holding the camera, she's doing the editing, and that's where the storytelling is. Whereas the actual words are not the writer's own. So I think it's really interesting. And then I don't know, have you read Grimish? I don't know.
No, but I've been hearing about it since it was first came out in Australia, which was a year or two ago.
Yeah.
But I have not read it.
So it's about this guy, Joe Grimm, who in the early 20th century, an Italian-American boxer who was famously really tough and very hard to knock out. He had 154 professional fights and he only won, I think, 20 of them. So he lost about 130 of his fights, but he's very hard to knock out. And it really is an exploration of pain, tolerance, the psychology of that, along with some quite abstract sort of writing, as well as just good sports writing. And, Michael Winkler is a really, really talented writer. I hadn't come across him before. We followed each other on Twitter, but when I said I loved Kick the Latch, a lot of people sort of came to me and said, "Oh, have you read Grimish?" So that led me to that. And then the final book just to chat today is the end of August. I'm not sure. I think you read Tokyo UN Station by Yu Marie and translated by Morgan Giles. So this is the next book of hers, and you can see it's about the size of two average-sized children. So it's a whopper of a thing. I reviewed it for the Irish Times recently. It's 700 pages. It's quite dense. But again, it goes all over the place. It was originally serialized, like a lot of Japanese novels, they're originally serialized. So it's serialized over 2 years, around the time of about 2002, 2004. It was coming out in real time at the time of the Iraq War. So this is really talking about the occupation of Korea around the time of the Second World War. And it's actually Yu Marie's family history. I think it's her grandfather, great-grandfather, and down through the generation. So it's a real kind of mosaic of a book. There are lots of different styles in it. It jumps around different characters. So it's not one of those ones where you do need a family tree to help you through it. But I liked that sort of sprawling kind of nature of the book. And I read it while I had COVID. I had COVID again recently, not very seriously, but I was in bed for a week, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And so it was a nice company during that. And I think it's one of those books that will be, I think, in the mix when the International Booker comes out. Will be mine.
Very good. And I can't let you go, but I am going to let you go in about 30 to 45 seconds. But do you have any reaction to the Nobel Prize winner this year for literature?
Yeah, I was delighted to see it was Jan Fosse. I think I love it. I think Septology is probably my favorite book ever. I read it and it had a huge impression on me. And I didn't read it. I read it in the installments because it came. It's now out as a full block. And I've read I think all his other novels in English, and I've reviewed him about 3 or 4 times for the Irish Times. So I think he's a really special writer, and he's a huge body of work over 40 years. Novels, short stories, plays, children's books, poetry. So I think he's eminently worthy, and his translator is such into English. Damien Searles is so talented. He learnt Norwegian specifically so he could translate Jan Fosse, and he's a very quiet, unassuming but hugely talented translator. So I think at times sometimes the Nobel Prize can be guilty of a statement choice. It tries to get publicity for itself by picking somebody topical or controversial rather than somebody deserving. So I think I'm happy for it to make a sort of to sort of do what it's supposed to do, which is to recognize someone who could, you can never say these things definitively, but somebody you could say has a legitimate claim to being one of the greatest writers alive. So I think they've done that with Jan Fosse. I hope it makes his work more widely read, because he wasn't really, a lot of, publications said he was an obscure winner, even though I think he's the most performed playwright in Europe. But it's a classic example of the Anglophone world being behind everybody else. So I think it was a really good choice and thoroughly deserved.
Well, you're all very grateful to you for doing yeoman's work in making the English-speaking world more aware of all these great writers. And I think maybe you should get the Nobel next year.
Yeah, I told my kids were asking me about the Nobel Prize, and they said, "Do you get any money for it?" And I said, "I think it's about €1 million." And they said, "You should apply for that," because they were thinking like, as if it wouldn't have occurred to me to say, "There's a prize that gives €1 million. Would you not just put your name forward?" I said, "It's not quite that simple. I probably have to be writing amazing books for another 50 years or something before you even get considered." But I'll keep an open mind on it. They're thinking of their own inheritance, I think, really.
Ronan, thank you so much.
Lovely to talk to you, Sean, and good to see you. And as always, a pleasure to talk books.
Wasn't that fabulous? And now I've been busy. One thing I can do when I'm tired or late at night when I can't read anymore, and I love doing it, it's a very relaxing activity, is editing videos. So there's been a whole slew of videos on my channel this week. Here's the week in review.
Promised, this is my 6 continent, 6 books, short books revisited, the wrap-up. As you know, as everybody knows, I did a flip the camera in September, and I showed you 6 books which I wanted to read, and I was and I told you about them. They are 6 books set in 6 different continents, and they are all shorts, and I read them all in September, and I want to do a wrap-up now.
That's why BookTube is great, because I get to find people who are interested in that book and who share kind of similar ideas about books and writers and things like that.
What you just said makes me want to circle back and tie a bow around my little anecdote about putting out a personal ad on local social media, because the woman wrote a message and said, "So what are you reading these days?" And I wrote back, "Oh, I'm reading a biography of the Queen Mother, and I'm reading a translated novel from Argentina, and I'm reading a transgender novel." I never heard from her again.
I hope that one day we can execute an idea that is better than what we have done so far.
Sure.
And
sure.
The idea of being persecuted for having that hope and for working towards that hope is kind of horrible. Not that I would be a spy.
No.
And there's a friend of mine who has this expression about a collateral audience. Some of us just happen to be there and we pick up the book, but we're not the ones the book is aimed at. We just happen to be present. And maybe that's what's going on, because juries, for instance, other writers, there are books that they love that some of us don't love, if you know what I'm saying. There are times when you pick up something because you've been nominated for a prize, and a bit of you is like, what was going on here? So maybe writers are writing for other writers, and we just happen to be catching strays.
All right. So what have I got to tell you about book-wise? I have finished 2 buddy read books, and that's it. And I'm not far enough along in anything else that I've started to tell you about, so this part's going to be short and sweet. I finished the buddy read of this book of environmental essays called Grassroots, The Universe of Home by Paul Gruchow. This was a buddy read with Heidi of My Reading Life. We both enjoyed it without actually loving it, but we liked it, and some essays I would say we loved. It was a little bit hit and miss. Paul Gruchow is a bit of an old... I started calling him Grouchy Gruchow. He's a little bit grouchy, and that comes through in some of the essays, and so it's not the kind of thing that you can cuddle up with like you might with a Wendell Berry, and I'm saying this not having read any Wendell Berry, but there's just something that's a little bit off-putting without it ruining the book. I'm glad I read it. I give it 4 stars, and one of my favorite essays was about home canning, which was I think the penultimate essay. He makes a lot of good points that a lot of other environmental writers have made, and certainly it's accessible. I think it's worth your time. It's not mind-blowing, but it's worth a read. That's my review. No, actually, you know what? Before I put the book down, I'm going to read you the last 2 paragraphs of the final essay. That essay is called Bones, and it's about exactly what the title says. Finding animal bones in nature, and so on and so on. But I like these last 2 paragraphs, especially the final paragraph, but you kind of need the one just before for context, is some of the most beautiful writing in the book. So again, he's talking about finding animal bones in nature, in the wild. The remarkable thing, in fact, is that one finds so few bones. Millions of creatures die every day. Where are their remains? Where have they all gone? And as for the dying creatures, where are they? You can walk for 1,000 miles and never once see a creature dying. Death is nothing if not discreet. The bones, every one, are miracles, the alms nature offers to life. It is hard to believe in miracles. They seem to fall beyond the boundaries of cause and effect. But a miracle is nothing more than a story that begins after the event. It is the mysterious space between the particles of a story, like the space between the particles of an atom, that makes the substance of things possible. The miracle of a bone is that it is the evidence of something particular that once lived, something unprecedented and never to be repeated, that has vanished yet nevertheless endures in bone, a faint white glimmering in some offhand place of life everlasting. I just think that's gorgeous, and that one sentence. But a miracle is nothing more than a story that begins after the event. I had to think long and hard of that, and I reread these 2 paragraphs several times, and I thought, oh, that's profound. So, yeah, I think even just for that last essay, or that, yeah, there's some really good stuff here. Don't let me overly poo-poo it. My reaction to this one is decidedly mixed. I also finished this buddy read with Joe Smith, Season of Migration to the North by Tayeb Salih, translated from the Arabic by Dennis Johnson Davies, and I wasn't so keen on it when I checked in the first time, on the first, maybe third, and then Joe and I really warmed up to it in the middle third, because if you remember, what I was kind of complaining about was it was a first-person narrative about this strange, mysterious man who'd come into the small Sudanese village where the narrator had returned from studying abroad. This mysterious stranger, decades before, had returned to Sudan from studying abroad, and he'd been involved in a murder trial, and I think he was convicted and killed girlfriends or whatever, caused suicides, and blah, blah, blah. And I just didn't like the way it was structured. I didn't like reading about this stupid, dark character. By dark, I mean like he was evil or whatever. That's so boring. But the middle chunk, we got more of the narrator. In fact, almost exclusively the narrator, and I got a real sense of this small Sudanese village that he had returned to, and how the story of the dark, evil man who had presumably drowned and then named him as the guardian of his children and his wife, how all that was affecting him. And there was a whole bunch of really interesting commentary on colonial stuff, post-colonial stuff, that I thought was really quite articulate. And then in the final third, with the exception of the last chapter, we were right back to that stupid, dark, evil guy, villainous guy that was so boring. So I hated the ending. Joe was much connected with it quite deeply. So I don't know what that says about her character. Just kidding, Joe. No, I think I'm the odd person here. I just don't like reading about characters that are like, his villainy was solely in service of the narrative. So there was nothing gray about him. It was all black. I hesitate to use the word black because he was black, but I don't mean racially. So he was just evil, and he did all these terrible things, and he had all this insightful commentary about the post-colonial realities of life, and what did he like to eat for breakfast? Like, I mean, that's a silly example, but you know what I mean. Like, it was just a stock character, and I can't stand that kind of stuff. And it also read, the way it was structured, like really kind of old-fashioned. Somebody's first-person narrative in the middle of a thing, and it just, I didn't like it. 3 stars, because it was very competently written / translated, and I did quite enjoy the middle part. But I would say this is a strong contender for one of my most hated characters in anything I've read this year. Just like people that are that malevolent, they just bore the crap out of me. So, that's what I've finished. Speaking of Gruchow, and Sean the Book Grinch Maniac this week, I'm going to be starting 2 new books to replace the buddy reads that have concluded, and I'm really excited about them and expecting good things from each. The new buddy read that Heidi and I are going to get to the beginning of November with is a classic of Western Canadian nature writing by none other than Sharon Butala. The Perfection of the Morning. This is her most popular work. I think it's one of my mom's favorite books. I have an autographed copy. It's a kind of a nature memoir. It's a memoir of her having been a city person all her life, marrying a rancher in southern Saskatchewan and moving to the countryside. The subtitle is An Apprenticeship in Nature, and it was published in 1994. I believe it was nominated for the Governor General's Award for Nonfiction, but I could be wrong. It says right there, shortlisted. Won a bunch of other Saskatchewan literary awards, and I am finally going to read this sucker with Heidi. And with Joe Smith, we are going to start buddy reading one of the buzziest works of literary fiction in translation this season. It's seen glowing reviews here, there, and everywhere. The Most Secret Memory of Men by Mohamed Mbougar Sarr. I'm not sure how to pronounce Mbougar. I think that's probably how it's pronounced. And it is translated from the French. Oh, I massacred the heck out of that. It's pronounced Lara Verno. Originally published in French in 2021. This won the Prix Goncourt and a whole bunch of other French literary prizes. And it has to do with plagiarism. Apparently it opens in Paris 2018. A young Senegalese writer, he goes on a quest to find out what happened to, I'm going to guess, an earlier Senegalese, certainly an earlier African author, who I think is just fictional in the world of this novel, who had a book published to great acclaim in 1938, was accused of plagiarism shortly thereafter and disappeared. And this novel is about the quest, about the young Senegalese writer in 2018 trying to figure out what all that was all about and what happened to the writer. So it sounds amazing. It's getting rave reviews. It's big, but also almost like large print, so that's going to be easy on my eyes. I'm looking forward to diving in. And I think I'm going to start one more because it's a library book and it's going to be due fairly soon. And it's one of those ones where I just hate libraries when they do this. Look they put the barcode right on the cover so you can't even see it. It's called Semicolon, The Past, Present, and Future of a Misunderstood Mark by Cecelia Watson. This was put on my radar by Chris of the Book Cookers. She talked about it in an episode of the Book Cookers podcast, that she was reading it and finding it very interesting. And I'm an ESL teacher, and I'm very interested. I have a lot of respect for the semicolon. I think I know how to use it appropriately, but I'm interested in finding out if that is in fact true. I've never read a book that's kind of a historical or linguistic book. I mean, it's a reader-friendly, I think, about punctuation, so I think this should be interesting. So that is my week. Things are looking up, and it's all because of my new blouse. Better wear this to Christmas dinner, don't you think? Thanks for watching.